This podcast explores the spiritual and metaphysical world through the experiences and opinions of the host and those interviewed, and therefore should not necessarily be seen as direct endorsement, medical or health advice, or personal advice to our listeners. We encourage you to use your own discretion, judgment, and intuition regarding anything you learn of through this show.
Welcome to Let's Get Metaphysical, the podcast that explores the intersections between science and spirituality. I'm your host, Renata Maniaci. In today's episode, we explore the metaphysics of dreaming and looking at what happens when our bodies are sleeping. I am currently traveling right now, and I was just with one of my dear friends in Thailand, Miranda Berna. Miranda happens to have a lot of really unique experiences while her body is sleeping. So we got in a really good conversation about the dream space. And that is what our episode is about today, all things dreaming and sleeping. This, of course, is not an exhaustive conversation on the topic, nor are we sleep researchers or scientists, but we are talking about our own experiences with sleep and dreaming, and I hope you like what comes out of that conversation. So are you ready? Let's get meta. Greetings, listeners. I'm here with my dear friend Miranda Berna, and we are here in Thailand recording this interview today. And welcome, Berna. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
No problem. I'm thrilled, actually. I will be referring to Miranda as Berna for the rest of this episode because that's how I call you. So, Berna, would you please share a metaphysical experience that you've had with our listeners?
Sure. The experience that comes to mind is happened actually in Australia. And I was studying abroad with some friends, and we decided to take a trip up the coast, the west coast of Australia, and it was a guided tour. We took a couple days and went up the coast, and then we just took 2 days and drove straight down. So we had to spend the night somewhere. And it was a group of probably 7 or 8 of us, and we ended up staying in a sheep farm. And I would say that out of all the experiences I've had, this one stands out the most because this sheep farm, when we pulled up, I felt like there was a lot of energy going on. And because of my mother's always been very in touch with other energies, and she kind of helped guide me to be able to feel them. I could feel them right away. And I was with my group of friends, and one of them knows that I'm kind of like this and have these feelings and sense these different entities or whatever you want to call them. And then the other girls that I was with just were not having any of it. So when I went into the sheep farm, I felt it, and it felt so heavy. And I said to the group, I'm not going to sleep here. I don't want to sleep here. I think I said something like, there are spirits here. I don't feel welcome. This is not my space. Mm-hmm. And one of my girlfriends kind of got upset with me. She's like, please, you're scaring everyone. This is where we have to sleep. Why are you doing this? Everything's fine. And I had remembered that a couple years ago, my mother had showed me how to try to capture spirit on camera. Mm-hmm. And so I thought, oh my gosh, I'm so sick of people not believing me. I'm going to try to capture what I'm feeling on camera. This was probably my ego talking, to prove it. Yeah, right. And it felt like it felt kind of like a heavier energy, and it felt a little bit negative. So I was with my best friend, the one who actually she kind of believes this and believes me a little bit more. And I said, I'm going to capture this on camera. And I did what my mom instructed me, which was I pointed the camera to where I felt the energy, and I looked away, and I snapped a picture. So I wasn't looking at the camera when I took the picture. My head was turned.
Wow.
And took the picture, and there's this, I will show you at some point. It's like this big black, kind of like a circle, like oval. It was wild. So
In the picture.
So I actually have the photo, and I showed it to my friend. I was like, here. At first I was in shock, and then I went and I showed it to her.
But you felt vindicated.
Yeah. I was like, I caught this for you. This isn't easy. I can't imagine this is easy. And so I showed her. She was still not having it. And this is still not the craziest part of the story yet. So what I decided is I said, okay, I'm going to sleep on the bus, because it was a fairly large bus, and my best friend and two other girls were like, we're going with her. They were like, we're freaked out too now. We're going to go with her. So, about half the group slept in the sheep farm, and 4 of us slept on the bus. So we fall asleep. We went to bed late. The stars were beautiful. We're in close to the outback in Australia. And we had 2 men on the tour. And so early in the morning, I heard 2 men get on the bus. And I was like, oh, okay, that's the guide and, one of the other guys. And I heard them come on. And then one of them grabbed my feet and, shook my toes, to wake me up. So I opened my eyes, and it was pitch black. No one was there.
Oh, my goodness.
And then one of my friends that didn't believe in anything, but she was scared, so she just slept on the bus with us, screamed. And she was like, did you guys hear that? I heard 2 people on the bus. And I was like, oh my gosh, I did hear that. So 3 of the 4 girls heard it. My best friend slept through the whole thing.
Oh my goodness.
So I kind of felt like another thing my mom had said is if you call them out, or maybe that's not always the best thing.
Right.
So I think it's possible that they kind of messed with us a little bit.
You feel like you might have agitated them?
I think maybe, I don't know. I don't have
any.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have any answers. All I know is the photo that I have and that experience on the bus was wild.
Mm-hmm. I've never heard that story. I know you were saving it to tell me for this.
I was saving it.
I didn't know that second part. I only knew that first part. I didn't know that was the thing to take the picture like that. Your mom taught you that?
Yeah, my mom taught me that, yeah.
Interesting, because I've definitely been with people who are trying to capture pictures of, just different phenomena, but I've never heard that you look away when you snap the photo.
Yeah.
Do you know why?
Look away. I don't.
Huh.
I don't know why. I don't know if
it seemed to work.
It worked, yeah. And that was the only time it ever worked for me.
Wow.
So yeah, I'll have to show you the picture sometime.
Interesting.
It was wild.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that metaphysical experience. And I know you have many more. We are talking about dreams today, and the metaphysics of dreaming and the spirituality of dreaming. Mm-hmm. And this is actually something that I've been interested in doing an episode on for a while, but I didn't actually know how to do it or who to talk to about it, because dreaming is so personal and individual, and it's different for everybody. And so just for our audience, Berna and I were talking about this a couple of days ago, and it came up that Berna has had lots of interesting experiences while her body is sleeping, and what we might call a dream state. So we were going to talk a little bit about that today, and I might share some experiences too. So we'll start with, when was the first time that you felt something or remembered something going on while your body was sleeping that was interesting? Seemed out of the ordinary, maybe.
I definitely was young, because I would talk about it with my brother, who had similar experiences, but my friends didn't. So I remember that.
So it was enough to ask your friends, do you do this?
Yes.
Does this happen to you?
Yes.
Yeah.
It was enough. I actually think the first time I started really noticing stuff happening in my dreams was just because they would repeat. So I could have, and some people experience that of my friends if it was a scary dream, so it would repeat, and so I would know what's coming next. So that was kind of
it was exactly the same. They were recurring.
Yeah, recurring dreams. So I knew what was coming, and I would try to tell the people around me what was going to happen next, and I kind of had the story down. And when I was younger, that was big for me, because for scary dreams, I knew what was going to happen next. So I would try to wake up.
Right.
Because I was like, oh, this is going to get worse.
Right.
I know what's going to happen here.
Okay.
So I'd say, yeah, fairly young.
So was that like your first instance with lucid dreaming? Because you knew that you could you knew that you were sleeping, so that you could try to wake yourself up.
Yeah, that's probably the first I remember is having those, when you're younger and you have scary dreams, and having that and trying to wake up. And I have different tactics to wake myself up, and some of the tactics I use my brother taught me because he has the same thing. So I would try to use those different tactics.
Sure.
And usually they work.
Okay.
Yeah.
What can you tell me about your lucid dreaming experiences? For the listeners, lucid dreaming is a state of consciousness when you realize that you're dreaming, when you become conscious when you're dreaming.
It wasn't until probably 2 years ago that I found out, I didn't even know the term lucid dreaming, or that people tried to do it. And I remember I was walking with a coworker, and she said, oh, my boyfriend's reading this book on lucid dreaming. And I was like, what's that? And she explained it, and I was like, oh, I've had that for as long as I can remember. So I didn't know it was a thing. But some of my experiences, I feel like when I dream, and I don't know if anyone else can relate to this, but it's almost like I get a lot of answers to questions. So sometimes if I'm really trying to figure something out, this isn't as prevalent for me, but I've had answers come. But I've also, more than that, I get information on other people. So I know I had mentioned this to you once before, but after I was studying abroad in Australia, I did a couple weeks in Malaysia, and I was with one of my girlfriends from college, and her twin sister, identical twin sister, was also studying abroad in, I believe it was Peru, and it was somewhere in South America. And her twin sister was with one of our friends. This is relevant later in the story. So anyway, I was sleeping, and I dreamt that my friend Sophie came up to me, and she had no hands and was asking for help. And sometimes I have dreams that are just weird and I disregard them, and other times I have dreams that I wake up and I know it meant something, and this was one of them. And so I woke up and I went because I was in Malaysia, and I knew that Sophie was with my friend's twin sister. I said, can you ask your sister how Sophie is? I'm worried about Sophie. I had this dream. Most of my friends know about my dreams, so she knew. She called her twin, and either that night, within that 24 hours, Sophie had been robbed at gunpoint. And so I think that I felt a little bit more, I'm not super close with Sophie, but I felt, because I was with the twins, and I just felt connected. So it's that kind of information. Stuff with pregnancies, if so-and-so is pregnant or so-and-so is trying to get pregnant, that kind of information. And then the last would be talking with people who have passed and getting messages from people who have passed.
Okay. And that's interesting, though. I feel like what you said before is a common occurrence to maybe a lot of people and many of our listeners, is that I've heard it a lot with myself and with other people, that there seems to be two types of, not maybe more than two, but like we have dreams where like they're dreams, and we know that they're dreams, and that are, maybe we're working out a problem or something in our dreams. And then there's experiences while our bodies are sleeping that feel like more than that, like feel like more tangible than that, more real than that, and more meaningful than sometimes our dreams are. So that's interesting, because you kind of made that distinction.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think it's important to listen to that, because we all have weird dreams. We'll say something like, oh my gosh, I saw you when I was sleeping last night, but you didn't look like you. You looked like someone else, and this happened. And sometimes it's totally bizarre, and other times I think it's good to follow that intuition.
Yeah. And there's so many different experiences that I've heard. Well, just even in my own kind of experience, but even in your experience, you're talking about being able to lucid dream, which is recognizing when you're asleep and trying to alter that. You know, you can alter what you do in your dreams. You've done that, right? You were talking about flying and stuff.
Oh, yeah. And I usually know I'm dreaming, and I can, this is great. It's not just like the heavy stuff. I will, like in college, I was told that I shouldn't eat gluten because I had like some kind of intolerance, and I was really struggling with that because I was missing pizza and all this stuff. So when I was sleeping, I'd be like, oh my gosh, I'm dreaming. I can eat whatever I want, and I can taste all the food. So it's fantastic. And I would say I know I'm dreaming like almost every night when I'm dreaming. So it's constant. It's like, it's weird if I wake up and I think of a dream and I didn't know it was a dream. I'm pretty aware. I'm also aware of like what day it is in the week and where I'm sleeping and all that stuff too.
Wow. So it's not even abnormal for you. Like, that's just normal.
No, it's my norm.
Like me, and for a lot of people that might be listening, like, that's incredible that you are aware that you're sleeping almost every night.
Yeah, I thank you. I'd say it's cool. It's also exhausting. Okay. Because sometimes I feel, especially in college, I feel like I was tired all the time in college, which you can relate to. We went to the same college. And I would wake up sometimes tired because my dreams were so intense. And I know I'm dreaming and I'm trying to wake up, or I'm trying to change the dream, or I'm just eating.
I love that, because I would give up gluten too if I could eat like a crepe every night.
Oh my gosh, it was so great.
That's amazing.
It's kind of like, I'm sure everyone's experienced, like if you have to pee and you're trying to find a bathroom and you're like, I've done that.
In your dreams.
And you're like, where's the bathroom? It's like that same thing, but I'm doing it with food. Like, I'm like, ooh, I want food. It's very similar. It's not like I'm going to pee the bed, but it's...
But you can taste what you're eating. That's
and I didn't know that other people can taste till, like, I don't know, recently, the last couple months.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, and that's kind of why I wanted to have an episode about this, is because I think the experiences we have while we're sleeping are so different and so varied that you talk about dreams, but mostly to your friends, if at all. Yeah. Maybe your family. But we don't know how many people can communicate or are communicating with people who have passed through their dreams. We don't know how many people can lucid dream or are lucid dreaming every night, or who are, doing things that they can't do or shouldn't do in waking life, and can consciously do those things, like, eat gluten in their sleep. So it's really fascinating to me.
Yeah, it's true. It's kind of cool to talk about, because it's something that I've tried to talk about with other people, and the conversation ends so quickly, because it's like, can you do that? No? Oh, okay.
Right. And then it's done.
And it's done. It's like, wait, there's so much to share. And my best friend growing up, she would make fun of me because we would have sleepovers, and every morning I would talk for like an hour about my dreams, and she never remembered her dreams. Oh, wow. And her grandmother would say, oh, have a glass of milk before bed, or try this, all these little things. Right. And she's still not a big dreamer, but I'm always dreaming.
Yeah. Well, and that's interesting in itself too, is like, so many people can't remember their dreams. I probably only remember my dreams about half of the time myself, and of the half that I do remember, half of those I feel like are just like dreams, like, and when I say dreams, I mean like I'm working something out from the day before in like, an exaggerated form or whatever, and then the other half of those do feel really significant and like soul significant, as though the way that I like to think about it for myself is that I do believe that when our bodies fall asleep, our souls can leave the body and go, have adventures or do whatever they're supposed to do. Yeah. That's my personal belief system. But like, there's still like a difference between like my soul having an experience, and if I remember that, I remember that, and I'm like, whoa, like this was real. This is not what we would call a dream, in the sense that it was just something that the mind or the ego made up while they were sleeping. So that's kind of how I distinguish the two, is that like if I had what we would call a dream, I feel like it's the mind part of my sleeping physical body that is having that experience.
Yes.
And then there's other experiences that is the soul part of my that can leave my sleeping physical body. Now, of course, I have no way to prove that, right?
No. I don't think we're supposed to.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, maybe we're not.
Yeah, and if it's true to you, you know, I was really interested in learning about dreams a while ago, and I haven't read up on it in a while. But I think we have like our dreams only really last like 5 to 30 seconds or something.
Oh, really?
I could be wrong, so no one quote me on this. Feel free to look it up. But there was at our college, there was a class on sleep and dreams.
Oh, was there?
Yeah.
Because I took one at the first college I went to because of the Hurricane Katrina disturbance. I went to a different school.
Oh, that's
my
right.
first semester of my freshman year at Tulane.
Yeah.
And I also took a dream class at my other school, and that was so fascinating. It was a sleep course.
Yeah. And they say, I think it's something like quick or, you know, maybe different. I don't know. So I think the science behind it's fascinating. And ever since I heard that, I thought like, oh, well, I don't remember all those. For some reason, we just remember certain parts of, you know, the night. But sometimes it feels like it's all night. So I'd be interested to learn more about that. But the brain in general is it is so fascinating because we know so little.
We know so little. I mean, that's what I was just going to say is like even the information that I learned from my like Sleep 101 class at Brown was probably cutting edge at that time.
Yeah.
You know, because my teacher was a really fairly well-known sleep researcher at the time, and our homework was like to sleep 8.4 hours a night. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, yes.
It was the best. It completely changed my life. So
8.4?
Her research was that if you slept 8 hours and 24 minutes a night, like that was the best amount of time for people in our age range to have optimal use of our waking lives when we were not sleeping. And I will say that completely changed my life, and I've stuck to that ever since then. As a college, that was one of my first classes when I took in college as a freshman. So I'm super thrilled that I took that class at that time because it made a huge impact. And she did I think she was doing dream studies. I mean, I'm not going to go into that. She did sleep studies. But the thing is, there is so much that we don't know, that, you know, we don't understand about what the brain is doing, why we even have to sleep. Yeah. In general. And then, like, obviously way less known about what's actually going on while our bodies are sleeping. Like, what our minds are doing, what our souls are doing. Anything like that.
And I imagine it's a lot. I'm kind of like what you said. I think there's like the physical part of it, you know, like the subconscious working through things, working through fear, working through anger, working through sadness, working through the details of our, you know, the days. And then I also think that there might be some different soul activity that happens.
That's what it seems to be like for me. Maybe not the only experience I've had with lucid dreaming, but I remember very clearly the first time I had an experience with lucid dreaming was in high school, and it came after a night where I was with friends and we were having a conversation about lucid dreaming. Like that was maybe the first time I had heard about it. Somebody brought it up and we were talking about it. And so that night when I went home, I was determined to do it. So I went to bed like really, really determined to realize when I was dreaming in my dreams, to realize that I was sleeping while I was dreaming. And I must have been super determined because I actually did it. And I realized while I was dreaming, oh my gosh, I'm dreaming. I'm sleeping. I can do anything that I want. And then I jumped in the air and flew in my dreams. Cool. And it was one of the best, most amazing, incredible feelings I've ever experienced. And my body was asleep during it. Yeah. And that I'll never forget that. And I don't know why. I think I continued to do that for a few nights, and then I just I didn't go further into it. But the feeling was so exhilarating.
to fly.
Yeah.
I've heard not everyone flies.
Yeah, and maybe they don't. I just now know that when I am flying in my dreams, that's when I realize that I'm asleep, that my body is asleep. I'll say that. So like now if I find myself flying, that's my, like, you know how you have little signs you said to know when you're sleeping?
Yeah.
That's my biggest sign to know that I'm sleeping.
Interesting. I think that was my brother that said not everyone fly. I feel like I've heard that before. Because sometimes I try to fly and I can't, and then other times I fly. But I always am very excited when I can fly.
Oh my gosh, it's the best.
It's the best. I don't know if you've had this, but I do this all the time when I'm sleeping. I will realize I'm in a dream and then tell everyone around me that it's a dream.
I've never done that.
Oh my gosh, it's so fun. But the thing is their reactions are they never react. Like if I realized right now this was a dream, I would be like, oh my gosh, this is Renata. This is a dream.
Right.
You know, and I would try to tell you to be like, we can go do whatever we want right now. Like we can jump off the balcony and try to fly. We can do whatever we want. We can eat gluten, you know.
All the gluten.
This is usually what I go for. And, still. But it's funny because no one seems to react. And then
in the dreams.
And my brother told me this was like in high school, that he does the same thing and he tries to tell people in his dreams and they don't react either. And I think someone told me at one point that everyone in our dreams is a reflection of ourselves. So even if you show up in my dream, it's not necessarily you, it's some reflection of me.
Sure. That I mean, that makes some form of sense to me. But when you say that, I automatically think of like the dreams. So what I was talking about before is like for me, this is my personal categorization that's not educated or like proved by anybody. But like the mind process of dreaming, the physical body process of dreaming, that makes sense for me there.
Yeah.
But when I'm having like what I will call like soul experiences, like if the soul is having an experience outside of the body while the body is sleeping, those experiences seem to be not the mirrored experiences. I feel like my soul's actually talking to people and they are talking back to me, or I'm having an experience that is not just only in my physical like mind while my body is sleeping experience. But what you just said about like everybody's a reflection of you, that feels more like an experience that your mind comes up with while the body is sleeping.
Exactly.
You know, dreams.
Exactly. Yeah.
I don't even know if I'm making sense to if folks are going to be able to follow this line of thinking, but
it definitely makes sense to me. And then just to touch upon too the speaking with people that have passed, because I wonder if listeners have ever done that before, and I think there's a lot of truth in that. And I think that for me, what resonates true is, you know, that's the time to connect, whether it's animals that have passed or people. It seems that it's a way for me to experience and talk to them. And I think what's interesting is I can be lucid dreaming and speaking to them. So I know that I'm dreaming. I know that they've passed. I know like what year it is, what time it is, what day it is. And I'll ask them questions. And I haven't received answers on, like, I'll be like, where are you? Where have you been? I never know what you're doing, you know?
You'll ask questions, but they won't answer you.
They won't answer those types of questions, like when it comes to like, what's next? What's happening? Where have you been? You know? They just, my experience has been with my grandmother, who showed up the most with me. And when I talk to her and ask her these questions, she just laughs. So I haven't gotten any answers, but sometimes she'll have a message that she will give me. And sometimes the message I've learned isn't always for me. It's for someone else.
I think you told me once that she's had messages for your brother or for
she had recently passed, and she'd kind of come into my dreams a lot. And one that really, again, it was one of those ones where you wake up and it was like I just saw her. And I was like, hey, Grandma, what's up? Where are you? What are you doing? And she didn't answer those. And she said, you know, I want you to know that when you talk to me, I can hear you. And I thought to myself when I woke up, like, that was a really clear message, and I'm not really talking to her much. Yeah. Like, I think about her all the time, but I hadn't been, like, praying to her or talking to her. I had been, I don't know. And I thought, okay, well, that's good to know, but I haven't really been doing that. Should I be doing that? And then a couple months later was Thanksgiving, and I thought I had told my brother, but I guess I hadn't, and I told him, and he started crying, and the message was for him. He had been talking to her a lot and just not feeling not knowing if she was there and feeling a lot of sadness, and when he heard the message, I think he felt, very strongly that it was for him too.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And we were very close with our grandparents, particularly my grandmother.
One thing I was thinking about when you were talking was, there are, of course, people who, when they're awake, they can speak with people who have passed. So, we know them mostly as psychics or mediums or people who can channel. At least those are the people who do it professionally. Who knows how many people are walking around that are doing that we don't know about.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to know that you do that while you're sleeping, and I think maybe a lot of people have this experience of communicating with loved ones while their bodies are asleep, and I wonder if it might be easier to do that for a lot of people because your ego is out of the way. Yeah. And you're not questioning yourself when that's happening. So, like, if your body's sleeping, it kind of takes your whole ego and your whole personality and your whole human, your humanness out of it, which I feel like might open the channels more.
Yeah.
So that you stay out of your own way. Because maybe those experiences could happen while you're awake, but you wouldn't believe them, or you wouldn't acknowledge them, or your ego would kind of block them out.
That's very true. I've always felt that I could see my mom connect in certain ways, and I could see my brother connect in certain ways, and I didn't even know that I was connecting while I was sleeping. I just thought I was sleeping.
Right. Yeah. I've had dreams of my dog that passed a long time ago, and my podcast listeners, if you've heard all the episodes, know about that from a previous episode, but I still have dreams that my dog comes into, and they're totally, and they're totally happy. It's always happy, it's always playful, it's always such a joy to see her. And like, that was such a long time ago. Like, that was the summer before Tulane, actually.
When you see your dog, or if you've seen anyone that's passed before, are they younger, or are they...
That's a good question. My dog always looks pretty much the same, and she looks like super happy, super healthy.
Yeah, healthy, right?
Yeah, and she was always healthy. It was unexpected when she passed. But yeah, just super like alive and like playful and happy. I don't think I've had too many experiences of communicating with people who have passed in my sleep, but I do have one. And he did look younger. This was a dear friend of mine from middle and high school, and we lost touch after high school and college. But he, a few years ago, was in the wrong place at the wrong time in Chicago and got shot and killed by gun violence. And it was horrible. And I'll probably get emotional talking about this. Wow. About a year after, almost to the day, honestly, after he died, I had I don't even want to say dream, because for me, it was completely real. It was real. It was an experience. I had an experience while my body was sleeping.
I like that.
That I was walking, everything was white, which is unusual to begin with. I don't really have dreams like that. And I was walking down just like this white path, and everything to the side of it was white, and it was outside. And I noticed that I was young. I was like a child, but with time, as I walked, I got older and older and older and older.
Cool.
And then up ahead there was a circle, and when I reached, and there was somebody standing in it, and when I reached the circle, it was him. And he looked taller, because he was a pretty short guy. He was taller than he was in life, and he looked younger, a little bit younger. We just like embraced and hugged, and like had our cheeks against each other's cheeks, and we're like spinning in the circle, and I could feel it.
Yeah. Wow.
Like I could feel his arms and feel.
Yeah. Feel him. Yeah, that was him.
Well, and I woke up and I just like started crying too.
Yeah.
And I don't think that happens with your typical dreams, you know?
And think of all of what you just remembered too. No, that I truly believe that was him.
I mean, and that's another thing too, is I wish I had a clearer way to communicate with my listeners on this podcast too, because I'm so interested in everybody's experiences.
Yeah.
You know, there's Facebook and there's Patreon and stuff for the podcast, but I'm so interested to hear, because when I tell that story, which it's not like I tell that story every day, and I still have the emotion in my voice, like, and I can still feel the intensity of what I felt during that experience, like, that tells me that it's true.
Yeah. Oh, it's true.
Like, that tells me that happened.
Yeah.
And I wonder what it's like for other people.
Yeah.
Like, I just wonder what the comparison is. I guess it's different for everybody, but these experiences, I feel like, you know, one of the reasons I have this podcast is to validate these experiences for folks.
Yeah.
And I think that so many of these types of amazing things that happen maybe go unnoticed or unremembered or invalidated or unvalidated, I guess, if they're never talked about.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I don't know if there's a point there, but it's just,
no, there's
it's sharing,
a point.
it's sharing these things.
Yeah. And especially like people who forget, because these are important experiences that we have in our lives, you know, just as important as when we're awake.
It felt so important. It was just like a validation. It was just like, I'm okay, I moved on to the next thing. Like,
yeah,
it's all right.
Yeah. And I do think that there are a lot of parallels in people's stories, because your story just then reminds me of my father, that when we lost my grandfather, he obviously was going through the grieving cycle, and I don't know how long later, but he says to this day that his dad appeared to him once when he was sleeping, and he knew it was him because he could smell him. And he said he went up to him, and that's similar, they just hugged, but he could smell him. He could feel him and smell him.
Yes.
And my grandfather had like a distinct smell, you know, like
Sure.
he smoked cigarettes.
Everybody
he had like
does,
a certain smell. And he always gets emotional when he tells that. And he was like, that was my father telling me that he was okay. So I actually think that all of our experiences are really different, but that there are a lot of similarities. And for me, it's always kind of relieving when I hear other people have these stories, because it's like, it's validating. It's like that there are these themes when people come to us or appear to us in dreams.
Absolutely.
I think it's really cool.
I do too. Well, thank you for having this conversation with me today.
Yeah.
There's so much more, as we both know and as our listeners know, that happens while we sleep and that happen while we dream. And we're just touching a little bit of the large iceberg today.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that was a
Absolutely.
great conversation.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Of course, Berna.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation about sleep and dreaming and the awesome, magnificent, mystical things that can happen while our bodies are asleep. I sure did, and I know that there is a lot more on this topic that we did not get to. If you are interested to hear more about my own experience in sleep and dreaming, and I have a few great experiences, please tune in to the bonus content for this episode, which can be found at our Patreon at www.patreon.com/letsgetmeta. If you're enjoying what you hear with this podcast, please consider supporting us on Patreon. For as little as $2 a month, you will help keep this podcast going. We appreciate any and all support, and we offer some really good benefits for being our patron. Do you have any ideas for what you would like to hear on an upcoming episode? Write those into us at info@letsgetmeta.com. We'd love to hear from you about what you want to hear about.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. Let's Get Metaphysical is a production of the Hana Healing Arts Network. The show's host is Renata Maniaci. Audio editing by Zoe Ravenwood. The voice of the credits is me. Aries. Thanks for listening.